She stood alone at her own sister's wedding, not as a guest, not as family, but hidden behind a dying palm tree, banished to a wobbling, folding tablet as if her presence might ruin the picture's 10 years of silence, 10 years of being treated like a burden. But in exactly 3 minutes, everything would change, because a widowed father, quiet, tired, and carrying his own invisible wounds, would walk across that crowded room. And 6 gentle words would shatter a decade of cruelty and begin rebuilding a new family from ashes. The reception hall glowed like a scene from a luxury magazine. Crystal chandeliers raining light over gold-rimmed glasses, violins humming softly beneath bursts of laughter, and champagne towers sparkling like frozen fireworks. But far from the center of celebration, hidden behind a drooping plant and a half-dead palm tree, sat a lonely folding table, the kind used for storage or spare chairs. And that is where they placed Immani, 22 years old, beautiful, bright, and missing her right arm since childhood. The Whitfields, her adoptive family. This lonely table was practical. But everyone in the room knew the truth. Guests whispered as they passed, "That's the adopted one. Poor thing, why would they bring her? She should have stayed home. Photos would look better." Their cruelty was never loud, never obvious, but it cut sharper than any blade. They used her for their perfect family PR image when needed, and then tucked her away the moment the camera stopped. Tonight was no different. As her sister danced under chandeliers, Immani sat in the shadows, her place card crooked, her water glass half filled, her smile carefully stitched on. She pretended she didn't care, pretended she was used to it, pretended the sting didn't burn anymore. But someone noticed. Across the room, Sean Carter, a quiet, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s, watched her with a tightened jaw. A widowed father, still carrying the ache of a wife who had fought for every underdog she ever met. His late wife, Maya, hated injustice. And everything about this moment felt like injustice wrapped in expensive decor. Sean saw the isolation, saw the forced smile, saw the empty seat beside her, the one no one dared to fill, and something inside him shifted, because sometimes a story begins not with a grand gesture, but simply with one person refusing to look away. Immani didn't notice him at first. She was too busy tracing circles on the edge of her plastic cup, pretending she didn't hear the giggles behind her, pretending she didn't see the pitying glances from strangers who didn't know her name but felt entitled to her story. Then a soft voice broke through the noise. "Is this seat taken?" She looked up at a tall man stood there, broad shoulders, gentle expression, wearing a navy suit slightly wrinkled like he'd gotten dressed in a rush and decided halfway that it didn't matter. His eyes were warm, but there was a tiredness in them, a heaviness she recognized instantly. Loss recognizes loss. "No," she whispered. "It's not taken." He smiled, not the kind of smile people use when they're performing kindness, but the real kind, the warm kind, the "I see you" kind. "Good," he said quietly, "because I was hoping you'd sit with me instead." Immani blinked, confused. "Aren't you with the groom's side?" "I'm with the decent human being's side," he answered with a small shrug, hands slipping into his pockets. "And right now, the decent side is pretty empty." She let out a surprised laugh, small, fragile, but real. He leaned in, voice soft so only she could hear, "Act like you're with me." She frowned. "Why? You need a reason to be treated like a person? I don't buy that." Then, more gently, "My daughter made me promise to make at least one friend today. Thought I'd start with someone who looks like she actually needs one." Immani felt something stir in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years, the faint glow of being chosen. "Come on," he said, offering his hand. Not grabbing, not pulling, just offering. "Please." For a moment, she hesitated, not because she didn't want to go, but because she had been invisible for so long that stepping into the light felt wrong, like she was breaking a rule. But she took his hand, and he held it gently, steadying her, guiding her out from behind the dying palm tree and into the open. Whispers followed the moment they stepped out. The room reacted like a single organism. Heads turned. Fans paused mid-wave. Lipstick-stained glasses froze halfway to mouths. "Who is she with?" "That's Sean Carter, the widower." "He brought her?" "No, he found her." The whispers spread faster than the music could cover them. Sean walked at her pace, not rushing her, not tugging, treating her presence like it mattered. When they reached his table, full of warm-eyed aunties, curious cousins, and one little girl waving enthusiastically, Sean pulled out a chair for her. "This seat's been waiting for you," he said with a quiet certainty that melted the knot in her stomach. "You're with us now?" Immani didn't know what to say. She sat slowly, feeling eyes on her from every direction. But Sean's daughter, little Zoe, slid her small hand into Immani's and whispered, "Hi, I like your dress." It was the first genuine compliment she had received all evening. The Whitfield spot her it didn't take long. From across the room, Mrs. Whitfield stiffened like she had swallowed ice. Her husband's smile evaporated mid-conversation. Her sister paused in the middle of a photo, frowning at the sight of Immani seated at the main table like a real guest. The mother's heels clicked sharply as she stormed toward them. "Immani," she hissed through a smile, so tight it looked painful. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at your assigned seat." Sean looked up, calm, collected, but with a protective edge sharpening in his gaze. "I invited her," he said simply to Mrs. Whitfield blinked rapidly. "I'm sorry, what?" "She shouldn't be sitting alone behind a plant," he continued. "That's not a place for family." Mrs. Whitfield's lips twitched. "Oh, well, Immani tends to make herself unavailable." Sean raised an eyebrow. "She was exactly where you put her." Mr. Whitfield joined in, placing a hand on his wife's arm. "Now, there's no need to make a scene." But it was too late. Guests were watching. Phones were discreetly lifted. That table wasn't meant to isolate her, Mrs. Whitfield insisted, tone defensive now. "It was just a practical arrangement." "Practical," Sean repeated, voice calm but cutting. "Hiding her behind a tree? Pity seats should stay where they belong." Immani's sister murmured under her breath. Sean froze. Annie Hattie did not .ms. Hattie stands up ms. Hattie, Sean's outspoken aunt with a church hat big enough to cast shade on its own, slowly rose from her seat. Her voice boomed like a verdict. "Now I've lived long enough to know when a child is taken in for love and when she's taken in for pictures." The room went silent. "You used this girl for 10 years, Ms. Hattie continued. Used her to make yourselves look generous, diverse, modern. Used her to polish your reputation." Mrs. Whitfield gasped, hand on her chest. "That is a horrible accusation." "Horrible." Ms. Hattie tilted her hat. "Baby, the only horrible thing here is how this child has been treated." People murmured. Heads nodded. "And now," Ms. Hattie said, folding her arms, "you mad because somebody finally treated her like she's worth something." A decade of silence breaks all. Eyes shifted to Immani. For 10 years, she had swallowed her truth. She had bitten her tongue, forced her smile, obeyed the unspoken rule. Don't make the family look bad. But tonight wasn't about them. Tonight, someone had chosen her, and the fire at her chest was no longer small. She stood slowly, heart pounding, breath trembling, but voice steady. "For years," she said softly, "I thought being quiet made me grateful. I thought shrinking made me easier to love." Mrs. Whitfield stepped forward. "Immani, don't know," she said firmly. "Not this time." The room stilled. "I was never family to you. I was decoration. A talking point. A way to show the world how kind you were." Tears gathered in her eyes, but she did not look away. "You didn't take me in to love me. You took me in to use me." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. "And I'm done pretending it didn't hurt." There it was 10 years of silence, finally spoken. Sean stood beside her, not touching, not speaking, just standing with her, letting her have the moment she had earned. And for the first time that night, for the first time in a decade, Immani felt something warm grow inside her, the beginning of a new kind of family. For a moment after Immani's words, the entire hall froze, as if the chandeliers themselves were holding their breath. Then everything broke at once. Gasps, whispers, chairs scraping, phones rising like a forest of judgment. The bride, mid-dance, staring in horror as if her wedding film had just caught fire. "What is she doing?" the bride shrieked, mascara trembling. "She's ruining everything." But the true explosion came from Winston, the bride's new husband. He slammed his champagne flute on the floor, glass shattering like a warning shot. I told you, he barked at the Whitfields. I told you she'd embarrass us. This is exactly why she shouldn't be here. People jumped. A baby cried. The violinist stopped mid-note. Winston turned his fury toward Immani. You couldn't just sit quietly in the corner like you were supposed to? Sean moved instantly. Before Winston could take another step, Sean stepped forward, calm, steady, and immovable, like a wall built for moments exactly like this. That's enough, Sean said quietly, not loud, not aggressive, just final. Winston scoffed. Who the hell are you? The man asking you to walk away. Oh, or what? You gonna play hero for a girl who— Sean didn't blink. Finish that sentence, he murmured, and I promise you won't like how you sound in front of all these cameras. The room stirred, because he was right that at least 7 phones were recording now.misses. Whitfield whispered, Winston, stop. For God's sake. But Winston's rage had no brakes. He grabbed another glass and hurled it toward a nearby wall, shattering it into glittering shards. Several guests screamed. Security rushed forward. Sean gently touched Immani's elbow. Let's get you out of here. She nodded, trembling. And while the hall descended into chaos, Winston yelling, the bride crying, the Whitfield scrambling, Sean wrapped his arm around her shoulders and led her through a side door, away from eyes that had only ever judged her. On the terrace, the night air hit like a blessing. Cool, quiet, merciful. Above them stretched a vast dark sky sprinkled with stars. Below, the muffled noise of the reception faded into something distant and unimportant. Immani stepped toward the railing, gripping the cold metal with her left hand. Her chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sean frowned gently. For what? For making a scene? For ruining her wedding? For, hey. His voice was soft, but steady. You told the truth. That's not ruining anything. She looked down at her shoes, blinking rapidly. You don't know the whole story. Sean leaned against the railing beside her, not crowding, not pushing, just close enough to show he wasn't going anywhere. Then tell me, he said. Immani stared at the sky for a long moment, gathering words she hadn't spoken aloud in years. When I was 8, she began, my parents were in a car accident. I survived. They didn't. Sean's breath caught, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet ache that recognized the shape of grief. I went into the system, she continued, voice fragile. They bounced me around. Nobody wanted a little girl missing an arm. Then the Whitfields saw a news article about me. They said adoption would look good for their charity board. Sean closed his eyes, just for a heartbeat, because the truth tasted bitter even before she finished saying it. They gave me food, clothes, a room. She swallowed, but never love, never family. I was furniture, something to display when they wanted praise and hide when they wanted perfection. Her voice cracked just once. I thought if I behaved, if I stayed small enough, they'd eventually love me. But I was just a PR project they forgot to pretend about. A tear finally escaped, falling down her cheek like a silent confession. Sean didn't touch her, didn't wipe it away, just let her cry without shame. Thank you, she whispered, for stepping him back there. I didn't step in, he said softly. I just stood where nobody else had the courage to. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time saw the heaviness behind his strength. What about you? She asked quietly. You talk like someone who's lost something too. Sean exhaled, long and slow, as if someone had finally opened a door to a room he'd been afraid to enter. My wife, he said. My Maya. The name alone softened something inside him. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. One day, she was laughing at my terrible cooking. The next, she was in a hospital bed telling me to promise her I'd keep living. He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes distant, but I didn't keep that promise. I kept breathing, working, parenting, but living. He shook his head. I've been alone in a crowded world for a long time. Immani's voice barely rose above a whisper. That sounds lonely. It is, he admitted, but it's quieter than the version of life I had before, where people pretended to care just because they didn't know what to say. He looked at her, eyes full of something warm and honest. You're the first person in a long time I've talked to without feeling like I need to pretend. Her heart softened around that sentence. Maybe it was the night sky. Maybe it was the chaos they'd both escaped, or maybe it was simply two people whose broken pieces happened to fit. But something quiet and powerful passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition, a soft understanding between two souls who had been carrying too much for too long. You don't have to go back in there, Sean said gently. I know. Then stay out here. With me. Immani nodded. I'd like that. Two broken worlds, finally seen, they stood on the terrace, side by side. The night wrapping around them like a shelter, and oh judgment, and oh whispers, and oh folding tables, and oh dying palm trees. Just two people. One missing an arm, one missing half his heart, finding something they didn't expect to find that night. Understanding, comfort, safety, light. And for the first time in a decade, Immani felt the warmth she had spent years convincing herself she didn't need, that a quiet bond had begun. Fragile, gentle, and built from shattered pieces. But sometimes, the most beautiful stories begin exactly like that. The wedding fight became the talk of the entire city within hours, and the Whitfields, polished, image-obsessed, allergic to accountability, panicked. Not about Immani. About the scandal. 2 days later, they called her into the marble-floored living room, a place she had never been allowed to sit in without permission. Mrs. Whitfield stood with folded arms, Mr. Whitfield pacing as if searching for the right combination of words to make themselves look righteous. We've decided, Mrs. Whitfield announced stiffly, that this environment is no longer healthy for you. Healthy. The irony almost made Immani laugh. You have 30 days to pack your things, Mr. Whitfield added without meeting her eyes. We'll arrange transport. Transport, A.S. if she were furniture. They didn't ask where she would go, didn't offer support, didn't ask how she felt. For 10 years they had called themselves her family, but it took them less than 5 minutes to discard her. When the door slammed behind them, the silence hit her like a wall. She stood in the living room she'd never been allowed to belong in, holding a piece of paper that felt heavier than the world. 30 days, leave the only home she had been tolerated in. Not loved, not welcomed, just tolerated. Her phone buzzed. Sean, everything okay? She stared at the screen, and for the first time since she was a child, she allowed herself to want comfort. She typed back, Can we talk? Let us be your soft landing. They met at a small cafe near the river. Sean arrived early, sitting at an outdoor table with 2 hot chocolates, one topped with cinnamon. The way she liked it. She didn't even get her coat off before her voice broke. They kicked me out. Sean froze, hands curling around his mug. What? They said the house is no longer healthy for me. I have 30 days to leave. Sean's jaw tightened with anger she had never seen in him before. You deserve better than that, he said firmly. A lot better. When she lowered her head and whispered, I don't know where to go. Sean didn't hesitate. Come home with me. Her breath caught. Sean, no pressure, he said softly. No expectations. No strings. Just a safe place. A warm place. He leaned forward, voice tender. Let us be your soft landing. Her eyes burned with tears. Not the painful kind, the relieved kind. She nodded once, just enough to show she understood. Just enough to say yes, that a new beginning. Sean's house wasn't big or fancy like the Whitfield. It wasn't trimmed with marble or decorated with expensive art. But the moment she stepped inside, with her single backpack, her one small box of memories, and the exhaustion of 10 years on her shoulders, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Warmth. The lights were soft. The living room smelled faintly of vanilla and clean laundry. The bookshelf was crammed with picture books, cookbooks, and a row of framed photos of Sean's late wife. But what captured her heart was Isla. The little girl ran down the hallway, tiny feet tapping like raindrops. Daddy, is she here? Then she skidded to a stop, eyes widening with joy. You came. Immani smiled, surprised. Hey, Isla. Isla grabbed her hand without asking permission and tugged her down the hallway. Come see your room. Your room. Not the guest room. Not the spare room. Not somewhere to stay. Your room. She blinked back tears as Isla proudly showed her the space. Soft blue walls, a warm lamp, a neatly made bed, and a framed drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. She pointed at the drawing. That's you, Isla said seriously. Daddy and me wanted you to feel a home. Home. The word hit like sunlight through clouds that a real home life with Sean and Isla was slow, gentle, human. Every night, all three of them cooked dinner together. Isla washing vegetables, Sean chopping onions, Immani stirring the pot with one hand and the quiet confidence of someone finally allowed to belong. They ate at the same table every night, not in silence, not separated by hierarchy, but laughing. Real laughter. The kind that lived deep in the chest. After dinner, they read bedtime stories. Isla nestled between them on the couch, leaning her head on Imani's shoulder. One night, as Isla drifted off, she mumbled, "Good night, Aunt Mani." Immani froze as Sean's eyes softened. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded, but her heart was shaking, and no one had ever given her a family name before. Ever. The next day, she applied to university to study social work. Why social work? Sean asked gently. Because I survive what other kids are living, she whispered. I want to be the person I needed. Sean nodded with pride that warmed her from the inside. I think you'll change the world, he said. And for once, she believed him. Slow burn, love the love between them didn't arrive like lightning. That IT wasn't dramatic or rushed. IT came softly, like morning light spilling into a quiet room. That I in the way Sean always made sure her favorite cereal was in the pantry. I in the way she made his coffee exactly right without asking. I in the way they both reached for the same blanket during movie nights and laughed. When their hands touched, I in the way Isla clung to both of them like they were the two halves of the same heartbeat. Point one evening, after Isla went to bed, Immani found Sean sitting on the porch, watching the stars. Can I sit? She asked. Always. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Sean spoke softly. You know, the house was always full, but it never felt full. He turned to her. Not until you. Her breath caught. Sean, he shook his head. No pressure. No ruse. I just realized today that I'm not lonely anymore. Not since you came. The confession warmed her like sunlight on skin. She placed her hand gently over his. I'm not lonely anymore either. He exhaled softly, almost in relief. And in that quiet moment, two broken worlds didn't collide. They aligned perfectly, naturally, beautifully, not rushed, not forced, just right. And for the first time, Immani realized she didn't just have a place to stay. She had a home that a real home, built not on obligation, but on love. Spring sunlight poured through the kitchen windows the morning the email arrived. Immani stared at her phone, frozen, her breath tangled somewhere between hope and disbelief. Sean noticed first. He always did. What is it? He asked, stepping closer. Her eyes filled instantly. I got it, she whispered, the full scholarship. They accepted me. For a heartbeat, silence hung. Then the house erupted. Sean lifted her off the ground, spinning her in a circle as laughter spilled out of both of them. Isla jumped around the kitchen screaming. She did it. She did it. Ma, Monty did it. They celebrated the way real families do, with burnt pancakes, messy hugs, happy tears, and too much whipped cream. IT wasn't the scholarship that made the moment magic. That IT was the way she belonged, fully, unconditionally. Joy shared was joy doubled. Later that night, after Isla fell asleep in a pile of glitter pens and note cards, Sean and Immani stepped onto the porch, the same place where their quiet bond once began. He looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing the way the porch light softened. Her face, you've changed this house, he said softly. You've changed me. She smiled, heart thudding. You gave me a home, Sean. No, he whispered, stepping closer. You made this home. You brought light into rooms that had been dark for years. You healed places in me I didn't know were broken. Her throat tightened. He took a slow breath, voice trembling just enough to be honest. I love you, Immani. Her eyes closed, a tear slipping free. I love you too, she whispered. I think I started the day you pulled up that folding chair for me. Their foreheads touched. Two lives once shattered, now fitting together like they had always been meant to. 1 year later. A backyard wedding. Their wedding wasn't grand. IT didn't need chandeliers or marble floors. IT didn't need a guest list crafted for reputation. IT happened in their backyard. under strings of warm lights, with Isla scattering wildflowers down the aisle and neighbors cheering like family. Sean cried first when he saw Immani walk toward him. She cried when he whispered, "You are my chosen miracle." They vowed to build a life stitched from gentleness, truth, and second chances. And when they kissed, even the trees seemed to lean in closer point. 10 years later, the auditorium was full. Students, parents, teachers, all buzzing with excitement. Isla Carter, the valedictorian, stood at the podium with a confidence that sparkled. She adjusted the microphone, smiled at her parents in the front row, and began, "Most people think family is something you're born into," she said. "But mine was built from courage and 6 simple words." The crowd leaned in. She looked directly at Immani, who sat holding Sean's hand. Now Professor Carter, beloved social worker, mother of 2, and living proof that broken beginnings don't decide your ending. The day my dad crossed that wedding hall and told a lonely girl, "Come sit with us if you want, my life changed too," Isla continued, "because that girl became my mother, my hero, and the heartbeat of our home." Immani covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. Isla smiled through her own trembling voice. "We are a family made from choice, not blood, and that choice has been the greatest gift of my life." The auditorium erupted in applause. Sean wrapped an arm around Immani as she wept into his shoulder, not from sadness, but from seeing the life she once only dreamed of, standing on a stage telling the world the truth. Love is not measured by DNA or last names, but by the courage to choose each other again and again. And they did, every day, for the rest of their lives. In the end, Immani didn't just escape a house that never wanted her. She found a home that always would. Sean didn't just keep a promise to his daughter. He discovered the missing piece of his heart. And little Isla, she gained more than an Aunt Monty. She gained a role model, a protector, a woman who proved that broken beginnings do not decide your ending. Because sometimes family isn't something you're born into, it's something you build with courage, kindness, and the people who show up when the world walks out. Their story reminds us, Sparkle's love doesn't check bloodlines. Sparkle's healing doesn't follow timelines. Sparkle's, and sometimes the most beautiful families, are the ones we choose. This wasn't a rescue story, that it was a rebirth.